Hello, and welcome to Gloomy Realm. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, atmospheric stories that quietly lead you into forgotten places and hidden corners of the night, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, let your body relax, and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly fade into silence. Tonight, the path before you disappears into the darkness, where every whisper carries a story, and every shadow hides a secret. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let yourself wander through the gloomy realm. Story 1. Looking back now, I do not think I really escaped that apartment. Something from the second bedroom came out with me. I did not understand it at the time, but the signs were there before I ever opened that door. The rent was too cheap. The landlord warned me too clearly, and on my first morning there, my slippers were standing neatly in front of the locked second bedroom, even though I knew I had left them beside my bed. I should have left that day. I should have packed my bags, called the landlord, and told her I had changed my mind, but I didn't. At that time, I had just moved to a huge city for my first real job. I was 23, tired, nervous, and almost broke. My salary looked decent on paper, but after travel, food, bills, and rent, there was barely anything left. Every room I looked at was either too expensive, too far from work, or so dirty that I could not imagine sleeping there. Then I found that apartment. It was in an old concrete building on the edge of the city. The outside walls were stained from years of rain, and the stairs were always damp, even on dry days. The hallway smelled like mildew, old cooking oil, and something sour that never fully went away. The elevator did not work half the time, and the lights in the corridor flickered whenever someone walked under them. It was not a nice place, but it was cheap. Too cheap, honestly. Still, when you are young and desperate, too cheap starts to look like luck. I told myself I had found a good deal. I told myself old buildings always smelled strange. I told myself I only needed somewhere to sleep, shower, and keep my things while I got used to the city. The landlord was an elderly woman with gray hair tied tightly at the back of her head. She spoke softly, but every word sounded careful, as if she had already decided what she would and would not say. She showed me the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the main bedroom. Then she stopped in front of the second bedroom. The door was closed. There was no sign on it, no lock on the outside, nothing unusual at first glance, but she stood a little too far away from it. "That room is storage," she said. I nodded. Then she looked straight at me and added, "Do not open it, do not clean it, do not ask about it." I almost laughed because it sounded so dramatic. I thought maybe she was storing old furniture in there, or family things, or maybe boxes she did not want me touching. I was not planning to use the room anyway, so I agreed. For the first few nights, everything was normal. I went to work early, came home late, ate simple meals, and fell asleep almost immediately. I avoided the second bedroom because there was no reason to go near it. Sometimes I noticed the door from the corner of my eye while passing through the hallway, but I told myself that was only because the landlord had made such a big deal about it. Then, on the fifth night, I woke up a little after 2 in the morning. At first, I did not know what had woken me. I lay still in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening. Then, I heard footsteps. They were coming from inside the locked room, slow footsteps, bare feet on concrete. One step, a pause, then another. The sound was soft but clear. It was not coming from upstairs. It was not from the hallway. It was not from the apartment next door. It was on the other side of that second bedroom door. Then another sound followed it, a low, dragging sound. It reminded me of wet cloth being pulled across the floor. I did not move. I barely breathed. I told myself old buildings made strange noises. Pipes knocked. Walls carried sounds from other apartments. Rats could move inside the ceiling. There had to be some normal explanation. But the footsteps kept moving, slow, careful, inside that room. By morning, the apartment was quiet again. I tried to convince myself I had dreamed it. I got out of bed, washed my face, and walked into the kitchen for water. That was when I noticed my glass. I always kept a glass of water on the small table beside my bed. That morning, it was on the kitchen counter, facing the second bedroom. The opening of the glass was pointed directly toward that door. like someone had placed it there on purpose. My towel was lying on the floor in front of the second bedroom, and my black hair tie was hanging from the doorknob. I stood there for a long time, staring at those three things. I had not moved them. I knew I had not moved them. That was the morning I started taking photos before bed. It felt stupid, but I did it anyway. Each night, before sleeping, I took pictures of the living room, kitchen, hallway, and the closed second bedroom door. I checked that everything was where it should be. Then I locked my bedroom door and tried to sleep. Every morning, one thing had changed, not everything. Never anything big enough to prove something impossible was happening. Just one small thing. A spoon turned the wrong way, a chair pulled slightly back from the table, a shoe placed near the hallway, a book opened on the floor, a cup moved closer to the second bedroom door. Each change was small enough that I could doubt myself, but clear enough that I could not ignore it. After 3 mornings of this, I messaged the landlord. I did not want to sound crazy, so I wrote, "Is there a noise problem in the spare room?" She replied almost instantly, "Whatever you hear, do not open it." That was all. No explanation, no apology. No question about what I had heard, just that warning. After that, I stopped using the living room at night. I ate dinner quickly, washed my plate, and went straight to my bedroom. I locked the door and pushed a chair under the handle. I kept the lights on for as long as I could. I told myself I would move out when I had enough money, but that could take weeks. Every night, I woke up before 2, usually around 1:50. I would open my eyes in the dark and wait. Sometimes I heard footsteps. Sometimes I heard the dragging sound. Sometimes I heard nothing at all, which was somehow worse because then I started imagining something standing silently in the hallway, waiting for me to open my bedroom door. One morning, I found a thin line of gray dust under the second bedroom door. It looked like ash. I crouched down and touched it with one finger. It was cold and dry. When I brought my finger close to my face, it smelled faintly of burned incense. That smell stayed with me all day. At work, I could not focus. I kept thinking about that room. I kept thinking about the landlord's warning. I kept thinking about the things moving around the apartment while I slept. I knew I should leave. I really did. But I had already paid the deposit and the first month's rent. I had no family in the city. I had no extra money for another place. And some stupid, stubborn part of me wanted an explanation. I wanted to know what was inside that room badly enough that fear slowly began to feel like curiosity. Then came the hottest night of July. The city felt like it was melting. The air outside was thick and dirty, and the apartment trapped heat like an oven. I came home soaked in sweat, took a cold shower, and turned on the air conditioner. It worked for 20 minutes. Then it died. The room became hot again almost immediately. I opened the windows, but there was no wind. I lay on my bed, sweating through my shirt, listening to the hum of traffic far away and the occasional drip from the kitchen sink. Around 1 in the morning, I felt cold air. At first, I thought the air conditioner had come back on. Then I realized the cold was coming from the hallway. I got out of bed and opened my door. A thin stream of cold air was slipping from under the second bedroom door. The floor tiles around it were damp. Not wet enough to make a puddle, but enough to shine in the darkness. The air smelled like dust, old wood, and burned incense. I stood there, staring at the door. I told myself I would only open it for 1 minute. 1 minute. I would touch nothing. I would not go inside properly. I would just open it enough to let the cold air move through the apartment. Maybe there was a broken vent inside. Maybe there was some kind of leak. Maybe the noises had a simple explanation after all. The handle felt like it had been kept in a freezer. The metal was so cold it hurt my palm. I turned it slowly. The door opened without a sound. The room was not full of storage. It was almost empty. There was a bare wooden bed against the wall. Beside it stood an old dressing table with one drawer half open. Above the table was a mirror covered in a thick film of dust. The corners of the room were dark, even though light from the hallway fell across the floor. Cold air poured out of the room like something breathing. I should have closed the door right then. Instead, I took 1 step inside. That was when my body stopped obeying me. My throat tightened so suddenly I could not breathe. My fingers went numb. Sweat dried cold across my back. The air in the room became heavy, pressing against my chest and shoulders. Then I felt it. Something was behind me, close, too close. It was standing so near that the air between us seemed to disappear. Then a hand settled on my left shoulder. It was light. That was what made it unbearable. It did not grab me. It did not push me. It did not dig its fingers into my skin. It simply rested there, cold, patient, almost gentle, as if it had known I would come in eventually. A car passed outside the building. Its headlights swept across the room and flashed over the dusty mirror. For 1 second, I saw both of us. I was standing in the doorway. Behind me stood a woman in a pale dress. Her hair hung over her face, long and dark, hiding everything except the shape of her mouth. One hand rested on my shoulder. Her other hand hung beside mine. It was too long, too still. The light passed across her body, but she left no shadow on the floor. Then I heard the wet cloth dragging sound again. This time, it was right behind my legs. Something inside me broke loose. I threw myself backward, tearing my shoulder out from under that cold hand. I slammed into the doorframe, stumbled into the hallway, and pulled the door shut with both hands. The moment it closed, a thin scream came from inside. It was sharp and metallic, like a nail being dragged down glass. I did not sleep after that. At sunrise, I called the landlord. My voice shook so badly I could barely explain what had happened. But the moment I said I had opened the second bedroom, she went silent. Then she said, "You went in?" I did not answer. "You really went in?" she asked again. Her voice had changed. It was no longer careful. It sounded angry, afraid too, but mostly angry. "I told you not to open that door," she said. Only after I told her I was leaving did she finally tell me the truth. A woman had died in that room before I moved in. She did not say how. She only said, "The others heard her too. They all left after opening it." The others. That meant there had been people before me. People who had been told the same thing. Do not open it. Do not clean it. Do not ask. And one by one, they had opened it anyway. I packed without showering. I did not eat. I did not look at the second bedroom door again. I threw clothes into my bag, grabbed my documents, charger, wallet, and phone, and left the apartment before noon. As I walked down the damp stairs, I felt something watching from above. I did not turn around. By noon, I was in a hotel across the city. It was small, expensive, and ugly, but I did not care. It had white walls, a clean bed, and no locked second bedroom. I checked the closet, the bathroom, and under the bed before letting myself breathe properly. That night, I slept with every light on. For the first few hours, nothing happened. No footsteps, no dragging, no cold air. I told myself I was safe. Just before dawn, I woke up to the smell of burned incense. My eyes opened immediately. The room was quiet. The lights were still on. I sat up slowly and looked around. My bag was beside the chair. My shoes were near the door. My phone was on the bedside table. Then I saw the closet. My black hair tie was hanging from the handle. At first, my mind tried to explain it. Maybe I had packed it by mistake. Maybe it had been in my clothes. Maybe I had taken it from the apartment without realizing. Then I remembered the last place I had seen it, on the second bedroom doorknob, and as I stared at it, the closet door moved, only a little. Just enough for a thin line of darkness to appear between the door and the frame. From inside the darkness came a soft sound, bare feet on the floor, then wet cloth dragging slowly behind them. Story 2. Burying my neighbor's chihuahua was bad enough, but now everything has gone too far. I know how that sounds. I know the first thing most people will say is that I should have called someone, or that I should have taken my cat away, or that I should have done something before it reached this point. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am a terrible person for letting it get this bad. But I need someone to understand that Nurgle was not always like this. In every other way, she is the sweetest cat I have ever known. She is small, only about 6 pounds, with soft gray fur and bright eyes that make her look much more innocent than she really is. When my friends come over, she walks right up to them, purring like a little motor. She rubs against their legs, climbs into their laps, and never scratches or bites. She even used to sleep beside our old tabby, Magenta, before Magenta's poor little heart finally gave out. They would curl up together in the same patch of sunlight on the living room floor, like two peaceful little old souls. At first, I thought Nurgle's hunting was normal. Cats bring things home. Everyone knows that. Sometimes she would appear at the back door with a chipmunk or a mouse still alive in her mouth. I would panic, chase it around the kitchen, and finally get it outside while Nurgle watched me like I had stolen her prize. It was annoying, but it was also kind of cute in a dark way. I told myself she was just being a cat. Then one evening, she came home with a deep gash in her side. She was sitting on the back porch like nothing was wrong, but her gray fur was matted with blood. The cut was long and ugly, and the blood around it had dried almost black. I remember my stomach turning cold when I saw it. She did not cry or limp. She just looked up at me and blinked, as if she was waiting for dinner. I put her in her carrier, set it on the passenger seat of my Ford Fusion, and drove straight to the vet. I kept looking over at her while I drove. She was calm, too calm. A tiny cat with a wound that bad should have been shaking or crying, but Nurgle just sat there with her eyes half closed, breathing slow. The vet took her in right away. After checking the wound, she told me it had already scabbed over better than expected. She cleaned it, gave me antibiotics, pain medicine, and one of those plastic cones to stop Nurgle from licking herself open again. The vet said she was lucky. At the time, I believed her. After that, Nurgle changed. Not all at once, but enough that I noticed. She became more desperate to go outside. She would sit by the door for hours, staring at it. Sometimes she would scratch at the wood until I had to pick her up and carry her away. If I opened the door even a little, she would shoot past my legs like a gray streak. She also started coming home later. Sometimes I would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning to the sound of scratching at the back door. When I opened it, Nurgle would be sitting there, with blood on her paws and around her mouth. Not a little blood. Enough that I had to give her a bath before letting her on the furniture. She hated baths, but she never fought me much. She just sat there in the sink, staring at me while the water turned pink and then red. After that, whenever she climbed onto my lap and made biscuits with her little paws, I felt sick. I could still imagine the blood under her claws. Soon she started bringing dead animals home, almost every day. At first, it was chipmunks, squirrels, birds, and rabbits. Then it became too many to ignore. Some mornings I would step into the backyard and find the grass covered with small bodies. 12 chipmunks, 3 squirrels, a bird with 1 wing missing, a rabbit torn open near the fence. I became used to it, which is the worst part. I stopped reacting like a normal person. I kept trash bags near the back door. I bought thick gloves. I would go outside before work, pick up the remains, and throw them away like I was cleaning up leaves. I told myself cats hunt. I told myself Nurgle was just very good at it. Then I found the Chihuahua. It was lying in the backyard near the shed, still alive, still making these awful, weak yipping sounds. Its body was badly torn, and there was blood all over the grass. For a few seconds I could not move. I knew that dog. Everyone on the street knew that dog. It belonged to Kathleen, my middle-aged neighbor 2 houses down. She was a kind woman who loved gardening and always waved when she saw me. She had 2 tiny chihuahuas that followed her around the front yard while she worked on her flowers. They barked at everything: cars, leaves, delivery drivers, kids on bikes, even me when I took out the trash. I used to joke to myself that one day one of those dogs would run into the street and get hit. But it had not been hit by a car. Nurgle had brought it home. I knew what would happen if Kathleen found out. She would call animal control. The whole neighborhood would know. Nurgle would be taken away and maybe put down. I stood there looking at that poor little dog, and I hated myself for what I was thinking. It was suffering. That was what I told myself. I went to the shed, got a shovel, and ended it. Then I buried it deep in the backyard. I thought that would be the worst thing I ever did. It was not. After that, Nurgle's bloodlust only got worse. Kathleen stopped letting her remaining dog outside alone, so Nurgle found other dogs. Small dogs at first, strays. Dogs that slipped under fences, dogs that owners probably thought had just run away. She dragged them home in the middle of the night, wounded and dying, and left them on my porch like gifts. I stopped letting her out, but somehow she got out anyway. I checked the doors. I watched my feet every time I left the house. I stopped opening windows. Then one morning I found muddy paw prints on the kitchen counter. and realized she had learned to pry one of the windows open. So, I locked all the windows. That did not stop her. A week later, I woke up and found a full-grown German Shepherd in my backyard. I still do not understand how she moved it. Nurgle is tiny. That dog must have been 10 times her size. But there it was, lying near the fence, throat torn open, eyes staring at nothing. That was when I started keeping the shovel on the back porch. I wish I could say that was a joke, but it is not. I got tired of walking to the shed every time. I got tired of pretending each new grave would be the last. I told myself I was protecting Nurgle. I told myself I was protecting myself. I told myself a lot of things. Then I found out Nurgle was not the only one trying to get her outside. One night, I was getting ready for bed when I heard glass break in the living room. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and ran in. A rock had been thrown through the window. Cold air blew through the broken glass. On the floor, beside the rock, someone had written a message in charcoal. "Let her out." I stared at those words for a long time. The writing was rough and uneven, like it had been scratched by a shaking hand. There were no footprints outside the window, no person running away, no sound in the street, just that message on my floor. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought boards, nails, and a hammer. I boarded up the broken window. Then I boarded the others too. It made the house feel dark and ugly, but I did not know what else to do. For 2 days, Nurgle stayed inside. She hated it. She sat in front of the boarded windows and stared at them. Sometimes she pressed her head against the wood and made a low sound in her throat. It was not a meow, it was not a growl either. It sounded almost like she was answering something outside. Last night, I woke up and heard scratching, not at the door, at the walls. I walked through the house with every light on, holding the bat in both hands. Nurgle was in the hallway, sitting perfectly still. Her ears were pointed toward the kitchen. Her tail moved slowly back and forth. Then I heard it again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. From inside the wall near the back door. I did not sleep after that. This morning, I heard a woman scream. It was sharp and sudden, the kind of scream that makes your body move before your mind understands what is happening. I ran through the house looking for Nurgle, but she was not inside. The back door was still locked. The windows were still boarded. I do not know how she got out. I only know that she did. By the time I reached the backyard, Kathleen was already dead. She was lying near the fence, half in my yard and half in hers. Her gardening gloves were still on. Her little dog was barking somewhere on her porch, going crazy. Nurgle sat beside Kathleen's body, licking one paw like she had just finished eating from her bowl. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. It took hours to dig the hole. Kathleen was not a small dog. She was a person, a real person. A woman who had waved to me, smiled at me, and talked to me about the weather. I kept stopping because my arms were shaking. I kept telling myself I should call the police. I kept telling myself I could still fix this somehow. But what would I say? My 6-pound cat killed my neighbor. No one would believe me. And if they did believe me, what then? It is mid-afternoon now. I am sitting in my living room with the lights off because the boarded windows make it feel like night anyway. My hands are blistered from digging. There is dirt under my nails that will not come out. Nurgle is in my lap. She is purring. Her paws are black with dried blood, and she is making biscuits on my stomach like she always does when she is happy. Every time her claws press into me, I feel like I might throw up. I do not know what she is anymore. I do not know if she is my cat, or if something happened to her when she came home with that wound, or if she was always like this and I was just too blind to see it. There is something outside the house now. I can hear it moving around the backyard. Every few minutes, something taps against the boarded window, soft and patient. Nurgle hears it too. Her ears twitch every time. She keeps looking toward the sound, then back at me. A few minutes ago, I went to check the kitchen. There was another message written on the floor in charcoal. This one said, "She is hungry. I cannot let her out anymore, but I do not know if I can stop her." And the worst part is, I think she knows that too. Story 3. I am writing this from a lake house in the middle of the woods with my friends. We have only been here for a few hours, but everyone is already acting strange. I am on edge too. though I keep trying to tell myself there is a normal reason for all of this. The first strange thing was the goat. We found it in the woods while walking to the lake house. Since then, my friends keep saying they hear something coming from the trees. I do not hear it, but that does not exactly mean nothing is there. I have cochlear implants, and I miss small sounds all the time, especially in places with wind, leaves, water, or a lot of background noise. The implants help me, obviously, but they are not perfect. The worst part is that they have been acting up since we got here. I keep getting bursts of static. At first it was soft and easy to ignore. Now it comes and goes harder, like something is pushing into the sound. I do not know if that means anything, but with everything else happening, it is starting to scare me. I wanted an outsider's opinion, so I am posting this here while everyone else is trying to calm down. Maybe someone will read this and tell me it sounds like a prank, or animals, or group anxiety. Maybe I am just letting old stories get into my head. I guess I should start from the beginning. I have known for a long time that my hometown was messed up. Not the whole town exactly, but the woods around it. People have always said things about those woods. Some of the stories were probably just made up to scare kids away from wandering too far, but not all of them felt harmless. There was one case from my town that got national attention when I was around 2 years old, back in 2006. A college student disappeared completely. People searched for him, talked about him, argued about what happened to him, and then somehow he came back. From what I remember hearing, he returned badly traumatized, both mentally and physically. He told people he had been in hell. Later, I think he explained it differently and said it was more like hell, not literally hell. I have heard that he is some kind of agnostic now, especially in his newer books. But back then, people only cared that he said he saw demons. That was all the town needed. After that, everyone had a theory. Cults, ghosts, monsters, government experiments. Missing 411 people talked about it. Horror YouTubers covered it. Conspiracy circles loved it. On top of that, Fallsboro already had decades of local folklore and urban legends. Every small town has stories like that, but ours always felt heavier. They were all different, but most of them carried the same warning. Do not go into the woods alone. When I was younger, I was obsessed with those stories. I read them late at night. I shared them with friends during camping trips. I loved the feeling of being scared in a safe way. I never thought I would end up in the middle of one of them. Maybe I am still not in the middle of anything. Maybe my friends are scaring themselves. Maybe they are messing with me because they know I grew up loving this stuff. I really hope that is all it is. But something about this feels wrong. Until last week, I had not been back to Fallsboro, Pennsylvania, since I graduated high school 3 years ago. I have been living in Philadelphia, studying pre-med biology at UPenn. I tried to keep some kind of social life, but that did not work out very well. I learned quickly that it is hard to balance an Ivy League workload with friendships. I made friends, but most of them were study friends, or people I knew from my rock climbing club. I never became truly close with many of them, not even my roommates. I did not go to parties much because I usually did not have time. Even when I did go, loud music messed with my implants so badly that talking to new people was almost impossible unless they knew sign language. Most people do not. So I started avoiding loud places unless I had to be there. The first few summers, I stayed in Philly and worked internships to help my med school applications. It looked good on paper, but it made me feel lonely in a way I still do not know how to explain. People always say college is an adjustment, but I do not think I understood how heavy that adjustment could get. I was tired all the time. I felt like I was disappearing into work, grades, applications, and expectations. Eventually, I realized that if I did not take a break, I was going to fall apart. So I decided to take the summer off before my final semester. I still had a strong chance at med school, especially if I stayed on track at UPenn. I had 3 summer internships, shadowing hours during semesters, a 3.98 GPA, and good practice MCAT scores. I was set to graduate a semester early. I was fine on paper. I just needed rest. More than that, I needed to see my old friends. So I called my mom and asked if I could stay with her for the summer. She said, of course. She told me she missed her little girl. I had only really seen her during winter breaks, when she flew me out to my uncle's house in Vermont. Other than that, we mostly talked on the phone. I tried to call at least once a week, but it was not the same. On the last day of finals, I said goodbye to my professors, my advisor, and the few friends I had made. Then I packed my things and went to bed. I did not text my hometown friends right away. I had kept in touch with them, but I was scared to ask too early. If they said no, or if they were too busy, I knew I might lose the courage to go back. And for some reason, I needed to leave the city. I needed to see those woods one more time. The next morning, I woke up early, brushed my teeth, and threw my toothbrush into a plastic bag. I bought a Rockstar from the vending machine down the hall because I had already packed my French press. My mom was supposed to arrive 2 hours later, so I had time to shower. I have learned to treasure showers since getting my implants. Taking off the clunky outer pieces feels good sometimes. The world goes silent. I can feel water pattering against my head, smell lavender soap, and watch steam blur the light. It makes me feel peaceful, safe, even though I am basically taking away one of my senses. I stayed in the shower for almost an hour. After I got out, I brushed my hair, did basic skincare and makeup, heated up a frozen breakfast sandwich, and ate it. Once everything was packed, I still had an hour left, so I sat down and read the bell jar until my mom called to say she was outside. I brought my stuff down and put it in her car. I can drive, but I never bought a car because I live so close to campus. I offered to drive back since Fallsboro is almost 3 hours away, but she waved me off. "Don't worry about it, Willie," she said. "Your old mom is still as energetic as ever. Plus, I am not putting my life in the hands of your driving." She laughed in that loud, charming way she has and bumped my shoulder with hers. I noticed she started signing first, then switched to talking. It was kind of sweet. "All right, Ma," I said. "Whatever you say." We drove back mostly in silence. We talked a little about school, but talking still feels strange to me sometimes. My voice still sounds odd in my own head. I had to relearn and adjust after getting my implants, and I did some voice training, but it still does not feel fully natural. After a while, I stopped talking and finally texted my friends. I made a group chat with my 4 closest old friends. I will call them Ashley, Britt, Avery, and Skylar. Those are not their real names. They are all girls, except Avery. My dad never liked that I had a guy friend growing up. I think he still believes Avery and I dated, which is funny because that was never gonna happen. I wrote, "Hey girlies," including Avery, "how is everyone? I am back home for the summer for once and wanted to see if you all wanted to plan something. Could be fun." Then I sent it and ignored my phone for the rest of the drive. I watched the trees through the window and let my thoughts wander. I am an anxious person, but I have always liked fear when it is controlled. I like the tightness in my chest. I like feeling like something bad might happen. It helps me stop thinking about things that actually matter. My phone kept buzzing, but I ignored it. Eventually, I pulled Wuthering Heights from my bag and read until we pulled into the old driveway. Seeing that house again felt strange. It looked like many other Victorian homes from the 1860s, but no house was exactly like it. That house was full of me. It held old versions of me. It was where my friends and I used to hang out, where we told ghost stories and convinced ourselves the place was haunted. It was not haunted, at least I never thought so. It was just old. I walked inside and dropped onto a new couch my mom must have bought while I was gone. She told me my dad was in the bedroom taking a nap and that she was going to make me a snack. I used the time to scroll on my phone until my brain turned off. Then I noticed the group chat. Everyone had answered. Avery said he was absolutely in and that he needed something to do while he was back in town. He said his uncle had left him a lake house when he died, so we could all go there. There were only 3 rooms though, so some of us would have to share. Skylar immediately said she missed my face and called dibs on sharing a bed with me. Ashley said she was down. Britt said she would go as long as Avery kicked out his roommate, because the guy was weird. Avery said Clyde was great once you got to know him, and also hot. That started a whole argument. Britt accused him of only liking Clyde because he had money and bought him things. Avery joked that he would not comment. I asked how old Clyde was when Avery said he was going on a work trip. Ashley answered that Clyde was around 37 and had been friends with Avery's uncle. That made me pause. Avery is my age. Clyde is 16 years older than him. I told Avery to be careful. He brushed it off and said he was not stupid. Britt immediately replied that this was debatable. Still, we made plans. Clyde would be gone starting Tuesday, so we would go then. It would give us almost a full week together. When my mom came back, she had a plate of cheese, crackers, sopressata, and a glass of Lambrusco. I hugged her and almost cried, which is embarrassing to admit. It was the snack she used to make me as a kid, minus the wine. Back then, she gave me juice. After she left to work, I put the ritual on the TV and zoned out. My mom was used to me watching whatever I wanted, so she walked by without reacting. My dad eventually woke up and came into the living room. "Oh, hey baby, you're home," he said, leaning down to hug me with one arm. "Sorry, work kicked my ass last night. I would have picked you up otherwise." Then he looked at the TV. "God, what are you watching?" "It's fine, Dad," I said. "I still love you. It's just a horror movie." He gave the screen a tired look. "Fair enough, kid. Want to go fishing tomorrow?" "Sure, Dad," I said, laughing a little. He nodded and walked away, like that settled everything. The rest of the night was normal. I fell asleep early. The rest of the week stayed normal too. I relaxed, watched movies, drank wine, and went fishing with my dad at a nearby lake. Honestly, it was incredible. I decided not to study at all for that first week. I just let myself do nothing. When the weekend came, I packed for the lake house. I brought spare clothes, hiking gear, boots, and some climbing equipment. I did not know if there were any good climbing spots around the lake, but I packed my shoes and gear just in case. I knew I would be furious if we found a good rock face, and I had nothing with me. I also brought a large water bottle because Avery said we had about a half-hour hike from where we parked to the house. Avery picked everyone up in his SUV around 4 yesterday afternoon. I was the last one, so everyone was already inside when I got in. I got the front seat, which was nice. Avery signed, "Hey bitch," then remembered he could just talk to me now. The others followed with a flood of, "I missed you, how are you, and have you gotten laid recently, because that is how my friends are." The drive was only about 10 minutes, but I heard about every kind of drama possible. Avery and Skylar talked about relationships. Britt talked about sports and school stress. Ashley ranted about books. Everyone complained about something. At one point, I almost got emotional. I got my implants near the end of high school, so I did not have many memories of actually hearing my friends clearly. Their voices were different from what I expected. Everything is different from what I expected. Avery's lake house is isolated, so we had to park about a mile away in a private driveway near the edge of the woods. Luckily, there was a clear path. I grabbed my backpack, which was almost twice the size of everyone else's. Skylar stared at it and asked what I could possibly need all that for. "Mostly climbing stuff," I said. I do not know this part of the woods, so I packed some gear just in case. Avery made a joke about Britt not being the only one with a carabiner. Britt told him to be quiet. He told her to make him. Skylar rolled her eyes and said they were annoying. Ashley just watched with a big smile. I was getting anxious, so I asked if we were going to start walking or just stand there. I think I sounded sharper than I meant to. Skylar looked a little offended and said they were just talking. I switched to signing and apologized. I told them I just wanted to get to the house and get drunk. Skylar smiled and apologized too. She said she was still thrown off by the fact that I could speak now. Then she agreed that we should get moving. Avery made another joke, tapped Skylar on the shoulder, and started walking into the woods. The rest of us followed. At first, everything was normal. For the first 10 minutes, Ashley and I trailed behind everyone else. She signed to me about a book she was reading. I think it was The Road. We have different tastes, but we always give each other little summaries of whatever we are reading. I told her about Wuthering Heights up to where I was, then started talking about rock climbing. I pointed out some steep rock faces as we passed them. She signed that I was lame. It felt good to be with her again. Ashley and I have known each other for a long time. Avery is technically the friend I have known longest, but Ashley and I became close in elementary school. I will not share her private business, but she is mute because of an injury to her vocal cords when she was a child. We met at lunch in 3rd grade, when my hearing loss was already getting worse. She already knew sign language, and I had been learning since I was little because doctors knew I would probably become deaf eventually. So, while the others talked ahead of us, Ashley and I stayed in our small, quiet world. Then, Avery broke it. "Hey, Wills! Ashley, come here. We found a goat." I heard the others talking, but I could not make out exactly what they were saying. A goat? In Pennsylvania? I called back. I grabbed Ashley's hand and ran toward them. Avery was right. It was a goat. A real goat, standing in the woods like it had been waiting for us. It was pitch black, a couple feet tall, with large curved horns. I had only really seen small goats at petting zoos, so this one immediately made me uncomfortable. Its eyes bothered me most. They seemed to follow me no matter where I moved. They were small, beady, and gold, with those strange horizontal pupils goats have. I hated it right away. Avery started joking that the goat must have come from a farm, even though the closest farm was around 10 miles away. Skylar mocked his wording. Britt made a joke about Clyde. They all started bickering again. I interrupted and asked if the farm was on the opposite side of the cliff face. Avery said goats could climb. That made sense, I guess, but not enough to make me feel better. Then the goat bleated. It was loud and sudden enough to cut everyone off. Avery leaned closer and said he did not think the goat liked us. Then he noticed its eyes. The goat had cataracts. Once he pointed it out, I saw it too. Its eyes were milky white under the gold. The pupils were barely visible. Goats can climb even when they are blind? I asked. Skylar said she did not know much about goats, but she did not think a blind goat could travel that far. Maybe someone dropped it off. Maybe it escaped from a livestock truck. Britt asked if goats could just live in the woods. Skylar said no. They were not native. In the U.S., goats were usually livestock, pets, or invasive animals. Avery called her out for claiming she did not know much about goats. She said she did not know about their physical abilities, just that they were not supposed to be out here. I said we should keep moving because it was already getting late. The truth was that the goat scared me. I am not exactly a skeptic, but I am not a full believer either. I can be pushed either way. And that goat was pushing me toward believing in demons. So, we left it there. The rest of the walk was mostly normal. I talked with Britt and Skylar while Ashley walked behind me. She signed things here and there, and I repeated some of them because the others could not always see her hands. We talked about the goat for a while, then moved on to life. Skylar wanted to get a PhD. Britt was stressed enough that she might drop out. Ashley had been focusing more on freelance writing than school. We also talked a little trash about Avery to get his attention. He was walking ahead of us, mostly alone. He would fall back and join the conversation sometimes, but after the goat, he seemed quieter, less like himself. Near the end of the path, he stopped suddenly and held up a hand for us to pause. "Do you guys hear anything?" he asked. I swear I heard a scream. His eyes kept moving through the trees. Skylar said she did not hear anything and suggested it might have been the goat. Avery laughed nervously and said she was probably right. We kept walking. Nothing else happened before we reached the lake house around 6. It had taken a little longer than expected, but not by much. Once we arrived, we found the rooms and dropped our bags. I ended up sharing with Ashley instead of Skylar because it was easier. Avery offered pizza, which I accepted immediately. I have no idea how we got it delivered out there, but I did not ask. We hung out in the kitchen for a while, then got bored and went outside to the fire pit near the lake. We lit a fire, played quiet music, talked about life, and made s'mores. After a while, we started telling ghost stories, even though the sun was still up. It was around 7:30 when we started, but by the time we were deep into the stories, the sun was setting. I only half listened at first. The music made it hard to understand everything, and I had heard most of the stories before. Avery told the old drip, drip, drip story with the dog. Skylar told a version of the Wendigo myth about a hiker who ate his friend and became a monster. Britt told a lazy haunted house story. Then Ashley told one. Her story was different. I had heard parts of it before, but not her version. I have been thinking about it ever since, mostly because of the goat. Her story was about a figure from local folklore. Around Fallsboro, people call it many things. The many-faced god, the stranger, the brood, the nut snatcher, which was the stupid name kids use most often. That name usually came up when people talked about missing persons cases. The story said it kidnapped people who were unstable, lost, or mentally ill. Some people linked it to the college student who disappeared years ago and came back broken. Depending on the version, the thing is either a mimic or a shapeshifter. Some people say those are two different creatures. Others say it is one thing that can do both. In Ashley's story, it was a mimic. The story was about a woman whose husband had recently run away. She knew he had gone hiking at Ricketts Glen, so she went looking for him. She searched everywhere. Eventually, she saw an elk standing in the trees. It had golden eyes, but the eyes were cloudy, like it was blind. When the woman looked into those eyes, she suddenly felt like her luck was about to change. Then she heard her husband calling from deeper in the woods. She ran after his voice. She pushed through brush, crossed a stream, climbed rocks, and kept going. His voice got louder and louder. She started crying because she was so relieved. He was close. He was just beyond the trees. And then Ashley ended the story. Avery immediately protested. He said that could not be the ending. Ashley smirked and signed that no one knew what happened, so she could not just make it up. We laughed, but something about it stuck with me. By then, the fire had burned down to coals. We added more wood and got it going again. After that, we just talked. Avery and Skylar bickered. Ashley and I signed about books. Britt moved between the conversations. We watched the crescent moon rise and the stars come out. It should have been perfect. Then everyone started acting weird. It began with Avery. He kept looking into the woods. He would open his mouth like he wanted to ask something, then close it again and try to ignore whatever he was thinking. He still made jokes here and there, but his energy was wrong. At first, I thought he was just tired. Then Skylar started doing it, then Britt, then Ashley. They all kept looking toward the same part of the woods. We were sitting around the fire in a circle, but somehow all of them turned toward the same patch of trees. Not randomly, not like they were all just nervous and checking the dark. They were looking at the same place. I asked them what was wrong. Each time they said they thought they heard something. I heard nothing. I told myself it was probably an animal, and my implants just were not picking it up clearly. The only thing I noticed was some faint static, but that happens sometimes. Not often, but enough that I could ignore it at first. After a while, everyone agreed we should go back inside because they were getting too freaked out. I followed. Inside, we started watching a movie. Avery picked some French horror film. That was probably a mistake. My friends said they could still hear the noise from the woods, even through the walls. After a while, they stopped reacting as much and seemed to agree without saying it that they were going to ignore it, but the dread stayed on their faces. I got worried and suggested we watch something fun instead. The horror movie was clearly making everything worse. So we switched to dumb YouTube videos, and people started to relax a little. Still, every so often, one of them would glance toward a window. They said they could still hear it. The static in my implants got worse too. It came in short waves, then disappeared, then came back. At first, I thought maybe it was interference from someone's phone or the TV. But the timing felt strange. It seemed to pulse whenever the others looked scared. After a few hours, we decided to go to bed. We had not drunk anything the first night because we wanted at least one day without a hangover. I fell asleep pretty easily, but Ashley seemed restless before I passed out. When I woke up at 6 in the morning, she was asleep. So I guess she managed to rest eventually. I ran into Avery while I was making breakfast. He looked terrible. He said he had not slept at all. That was not completely unusual because he has a history of insomnia, but he said the noises did not stop until sunrise. That bothered me. I tried to ignore it. I really did. There was a cliff about half a mile from the lake house, according to Avery. It was supposed to be a pretty easy climb, so I decided to go out that morning. I had brought all my gear, ropes, carabiners, harness, climbing shoes, everything. The cliff was not huge, maybe 20 to 30 yards high, but it was still high enough that falling could seriously injure or kill me. I set everything up and started climbing slowly. At first, it went fine. Then the static came back. It started soft, then grew stronger. Within minutes, it sounded like an army of bees pouring into my ears. I tried to push through it, but I could not focus. I found a safe place to brace my feet against the wall and keep tension on the rope. Then I took off the outer pieces of my implants. The world went silent. Instantly, I felt calmer. I finished the climb without any more problems. At the top, I put the pieces back on, but the static was still there, loud and sharp. So I took them off again before belaying down. When my feet touched the ground, I put them back on. The static was completely gone. Maybe it was just interference. Maybe there is something around the cliff that messes with the devices. Maybe there is a tower nearby, or some kind of electrical issue at the lake house. I do not know. But after the goat, the stories, the sounds from the woods, and my friends acting like something was standing just beyond the firelight, I am getting nervous. I am writing this a few hours after my climb. Everyone is trying to act normal, but none of us really feels normal. They keep listening toward the trees. I keep waiting for the static to come back. Maybe all of this is nothing. Maybe the goat was just a goat. The sounds were just animals, and my implants are just glitching. But that goat had blind, cloudy, golden eyes. And Ashley's story had an animal with blind, cloudy, golden eyes. And my friends keep hearing something in the woods that I cannot hear. I am going to try to enjoy the rest of the trip. But if anything else happens, I will update. Story 4. It hurts again. I can still feel it under the cast sometimes, tightening around my leg like it never really let go. It comes in slow waves, first a dull throb, then a squeezing feeling, then that awful cold pressure that makes my stomach turn. It feels like something is coiling around the bone from the inside, that cold, slimy grip. My friends keep telling me I need to talk about what happened. They say it might help if I stop keeping it all in my head, but when I try to explain it, they look at me the same way the doctors did. Soft voices, careful eyes, that quiet little pause before they answer, like they are trying to decide how crazy I am. I am not crazy. I know what happened to me. It happened 3 days ago. I work at a local chicken plant as a maintenance worker. If you have never been inside one of those places, count yourself lucky. People imagine clean white walls, hairnets, machines, and plastic-wrapped meat moving down a line. And yes, some parts of the place look like that. But that is not the whole story. Our plant handles almost everything from beginning to end. Some places split the work between different factories, but not here. We have live hang, cutting, deboning, dicing, packing, and even a few lines where they cook chicken for restaurants and fast food places. There is a good chance that if you live anywhere nearby, you have eaten something that passed through that building. But it is not all clean machines and workers and gloves. There are dirty jobs too. A lot of the giblets, scraps, skin, fat, and leftover pieces get sent off to be turned into pet food. That is what management likes to say anyway. They talk about waste reduction and efficiency whenever inspectors or company people come around. But anyone who actually works there knows there is still plenty of wasted meat. Bits that fall where they should not. Sludge from the lines. Things that get washed away before anyone bothers to collect them. All of that ends up in the drainage system. The plant has this whole maze of grates, pipes, channels, and tunnels running underneath it. They all feed into a large wastewater pond behind the building. I know that sounds awful for the environment, and maybe it is. I have never pretended to be an expert on that. The company says everything is treated, diluted, and sterile enough by the time it gets released. They have charts and reports and people in clean shirts who know how to make bad things sound normal. Still, in the summer, the whole town can smell it. There are days when the air gets heavy and wet, and that smell rolls over the streets like a blanket. Rotting chicken, hot grease, pond water, chemicals, and something sour underneath it all. People complain about it all the time. They complain at the gas station, at church, at the grocery store, outside the school. But they still send their teenagers' cousins, husbands, wives, and friends to work there because there is almost nothing else around. That is why I work there too. Maintenance pays better than working the line, and most of the time, it is not that bad. You fix loose bolts, change belts, replace power cords, tighten things, swap out broken parts, and patch leaks until someone higher up decides to actually replace something. Most of what I know, I learned by watching the older guys and asking questions. The rest came from lunch break YouTube videos and pretending I understood the first time someone explained it. There was only one job the old hands always managed to avoid: pipe clearing. Every once in a while, some big clump of skin, fat, feathers, plastic, and whatever else would get stuck somewhere in the drainage system. It would slow the flow, cause water to back up through the grates, or start collecting near one of the tunnels leading out to the wastewater pond. It was usually simple work, but it was disgusting. You went down there with gloves, boots, and a tool, and you pulled the blockage loose. Then you came back smelling like rotten meat no matter how much you washed. That was why they always gave it to the newer guys. Guys like me. Mikey had done it the last time there was a problem, so when the report came in, everyone suddenly decided it was my turn. Nobody said it like that, of course. They joked about it, slapped me on the shoulder, told me it was character building, told me not to breathe through my nose. Very funny. I decided to eat lunch before going down. I figured I would not have much of an appetite after walking through ankle-deep chicken water. The report said several floor grates were draining too slowly. Some were taking almost an hour to clear when they should have drained in minutes. There was also a strong smell of rot coming up from Tunnel B. That meant I had to check the grates and channels from the factory floor all the way out to the concrete outfall over the pond. The outfall is this square concrete mouth that sticks out 6 or 7 feet above the wastewater pond. The tunnel behind it is protected by a heavy metal grate, so nothing big can get in from outside, and nothing big should be able to get out from inside. At least, that is what I used to think. I grabbed a radio, a pair of thick rubber cleanout gloves, and one of the tools maintenance uses for these jobs. It was basically a 3-pronged garden cultivator, the kind people use to pull weeds and loosen soil, except ours was stained brown and red from years of scraping through drainage sludge. It worked well enough for dragging out clumps when you did not want to put your hands anywhere near them. I started with the grates listed in the report. I pulled off the metal covers and checked the flow. There was definitely backflow, but I did not see anything obvious blocking them. The liquid underneath was red-brown and cloudy, moving sluggishly through the channel. I stuck the cultivator in and dragged it along the bottom. The metal tip scraped concrete and came back with a few scraps of fat and one torn feather stuck between the prongs. Nothing major. I followed the line down and repeated the same thing a few more times. Same result. Dirty water, scraping sounds, small pieces of waste. No big blockage. After a while, I figured it would be easier to stop chasing the backup from the top and just find the place where the water was not moving. So I went down the maintenance stairs into Tunnel B. The air changed as soon as I opened the door. Inside the plant, everything smells bad in layers. Raw chicken, bleach, hot oil, metal, sweat, and plastic. Down in the tunnel, the smell was thicker and older. The lights were spaced along the ceiling, bright enough to see, but not bright enough to make the place feel clean. The walls were damp concrete. The channel ran beside the walkway, sloping down toward the pond. Dirty water moved slowly along it, making soft, wet sounds that echoed too much in the narrow space. The farther I went, the deeper the water got. At first, it was just an inch or two. My boots splashed through it, and I told myself it was fine. Then it reached my ankles. The splashing turned into sloshing. I dragged my feet through the stuff, trying not to think about what was brushing against the rubber. For once, I was thankful for the ugly, uncomfortable boots the company made us wear. Then the water climbed to my shins. That was when I started to get nervous. The boots went up pretty high, but if the water got any deeper, I would have to turn back and get waders. I did not want to do that. It would mean walking all the way back, admitting I had not finished, and probably hearing jokes from the older guys for the rest of the week. Thankfully, the water stayed around shin height as I reached the last stretch of the drainage tunnel. The smell did not stay the same. It got worse with every step. At first, it was the normal stale stink of sterilized, rotting poultry. Bad, but familiar. Then it changed into something deeper. More like sewage. More like the time I helped my neighbor pull a dead possum out from under his shed in July. It was sweet, but in the wrong way. Like fruit that had gone soft and rotten, right before that greasy dead smell hit the back of your throat and stayed there. I swallowed hard and tried to breathe through my mouth, but that only made me taste it. Finally, I reached the outflow. The tunnel ended at a square concrete culvert leading to the outfall. A large metal grate separated the tunnel from the outside. Beyond it, I could see daylight reflecting off the pond. The plant kept the tunnel lit, but the natural light through the grate looked strange and pale after the yellowish bulbs overhead. Even from a distance, I could tell the water was not moving right. Normally, the waste flows out in a steady sheet through the grate and drops into the pond. It is disgusting, but it moves. That day, it barely moved at all. The water near the grate turned in a slow, lazy spiral, like something was choking it off. A small amount trickled through near the bottom, followed now and then by a wet splash when waste spilled over whatever was blocking it. Then I heard buzzing. Flies, a lot of them. They were gathered near the grate and outside the outfall, crawling and lifting and landing again. The sound made my skin itch. I could not see exactly what they were on, but I knew enough. Flies do not gather like that for clean water. I walked along the edge where the walkway stayed level, while the drainage channel sloped down. That meant the water was deeper near the grate, and whatever was blocking it had to be big enough to cover several feet of metal. I remember sighing and thinking, this is going to be awful. I was sure it was some huge mass of chicken skin, fat, feathers, and plastic that had slipped through the system and gathered at the grate. It had happened before, just never this badly while I was the one assigned to clear it. The water near the grate looked different from the rest. It had turned murky and thick, almost like the pond outside had pushed its way back into the tunnel. I could not see the bottom. I could not see the grate under the water. Everything was brown-green and cloudy, with darker patches shifting below the surface. I gripped the cultivator with both hands and pushed the prongs deep into the water. The tips hit something before they reached the grate. There was resistance. Not hard, like metal or wood. Rubbery, soft, but firm. I pressed harder and tried to drag the tool upward from as low as I could reach. Whatever was down there slid under the prongs and stretched away from them. I could feel it between the cultivator and the metal grate, but I could not hook it. When I pulled the tool back, something came with it. A long glob of greenish slime hung from the prongs. It looked like algae at first, but thicker, heavier. It stretched in strings and dropped back into the water with a wet slap. I nearly gagged. The smell got worse the second that slime broke the surface. It was pond muck mixed with putrid meat, but stronger than both. It punched straight through my mouth, breathing, and filled my nose anyway. My stomach rolled. That was when I noticed the water around my boots was moving. Not from me, not from the flow. Something shifted under the surface near my feet. Before I could think about that, I threw up. The smell had finally done it. The cheap chicken meal I had eaten for lunch came up hard and fast. I bent forward, eyes squeezed shut, one hand on the cultivator and the other reaching out for balance. That tiny moment was all it needed. Something clamped down on my boot. Hard. At first, it did not hurt. It was more like a pressure, a sudden grip around my foot, like someone had reached up through the filthy water and grabbed me. I jerked back, but my boot did not move. I pulled harder. The grip tightened. Then something wrapped around my other foot too. I lost my balance and fell backward against the metal grate. The whole thing shook when I hit it. The sound rang through the tunnel, metal banging and echoing off concrete. My tool splashed into the water somewhere beside me. I wish I could say I stayed calm. I wish I could say I took a deep breath, grabbed the radio, and called for help. I did not. I screamed. I thrashed like an animal. I dug my fingers into the greasy metal grate behind me and tried to pull myself up out of the water. I kicked as hard as I could, but the thing around my feet held on. It pulled me down and back, pressing me against the grate. The more I fought, the tighter it got. Every time I managed to lift myself even a few inches, it yanked me back down. Every time I kicked, the grip seemed to slide higher. Not fast, not like a snake striking. Slow and steady, like it was learning the shape of me. I kept fighting until I felt it go into my boots. That was when my mind almost broke. It was no longer just around the rubber outside. It was inside, pouring in, pressing against my socks, sliding around my feet. Have you ever held raw chicken skin? That cold, rubbery, loose feeling. That was all I could think about. I imagined my boots filling with wriggling scraps of pale skin, wrapping between my toes, folding around my ankles. The smell was everywhere. I will never forget it. I do not think I can forget it. No matter how hard I scrub my legs, no matter how much soap I use, I still smell it sometimes. When I'm alone and the room is quiet, when nothing is happening, that waterlogged, sickly, sweet rot comes back like it is hiding in my own skin. Somewhere during my panic, my radio disappeared. Maybe the cheap clip snapped when I hit the grate. Maybe I knocked it off while I was thrashing. Maybe it fell into the water and got pulled under. I do not know. They never found it. So I was trapped there, breathing too fast, shaking, and gripping the slick metal behind me while something slowly crawled up my legs. The strange part was that when I stopped struggling, it slowed down. I realized it by accident. I was exhausted. My arms were burning. My throat hurt from screaming. For a few seconds, I could not fight anymore. I just sat there with my back against the grate, chest heaving, legs trapped in the water. The thing stopped pulling so hard. It still moved, but slower, almost gently. That was when I saw it. At least, I saw part of it. The part climbing up my pants was mostly clear slime. Not fully clear, but transparent enough that I could see things inside it. Yellow-white chunks floated through it, and I realized they were pieces of fat. There were little pockets of cloudy, discolored liquid trapped in its body, bubbling slightly as it moved. Near the waterline, I saw rusty red patches suspended inside it, lazily shifting like blood in oil. Deeper under the surface, there were darker blobs, almost black. They rose and sank as the thing moved, coming close enough to the surface for me to see them before they disappeared again. I screamed until my voice cracked. No one came. Of course no one came. I was deep in Tunnel B, near the outfall, behind concrete walls and machinery noise. Maybe someone would have heard me if they had walked down the maintenance stairwell at that exact moment. But nobody went down there unless they had a reason. Nobody had a reason. The worst part was that I could see the town. Through the grate, past the outfall and the wastewater pond, I could see part of the road leading away from the factory. Cars moved in the distance, tiny and normal. People were driving home, going to stores, heading to work, living their lives. The town kept moving while I sat trapped in filth, waiting for that thing to finish climbing over me. None of my shouting mattered. The cars kept going. The world did not stop. I think it had been about an hour when I threw up again. Maybe less, maybe more. Time did not feel real down there. The thing had reached my stomach by then. It squeezed me like a wet belt. It was not in a hurry now that I had stopped fighting. It seemed content to keep pressing and crawling inch by inch. I tried not to look at it, but I could not stop myself. Inside those pockets of yellowed water, I saw tiny shapes twitching. At first I thought it was just bubbles, but then one moved with a little curl and snap. Mosquito larvae. Or something close enough that my brain gave it that name. Thin, pale things twitching inside the slime as it pressed against me. That was too much. I threw up down the front of my work suit. I could not lean forward properly because the thing had pinned me against the grate, so most of it ran down my chest and stomach. Warm vomit soaked into my clothes and dripped onto the slime wrapped around me. The moment it touched the thing, everything stopped. The slow movement froze. Even the pressure changed. For one horrible second, I thought it was going to let go. Then it started drinking. That is the only word I have for it. The vomit did not just sit on the surface. It sank into the slime. The thing pulled it in, sucking the trickle down into itself. I watched bits of breaded chicken and brownish liquids slide toward one of the dark areas inside the mass. The slime around it pulsed in small contractions, like a throat swallowing, over and over again. I still see that in my dreams. I still see the trail of vomit running down my clothes and the thing following it upward, not crawling randomly anymore, following, tracing the path toward my face. I lost control again. I tore at it with my hands. I dug my fingers into the slime and ripped chunks away from my stomach and chest. It came apart in heavy, sticky pieces, clinging between my fingers like raw egg and skin. I flung it away, but the pieces hit the water and seemed to melt back into the larger mass. Then it reacted. It wrapped around my fingers. The slime tightened so fast I heard something pop in my hand. Pain shot through my fingers and up my wrist. I cried out and tried to pull free, but the thing held my hand against my body. Then the rest of it tightened too. It was pinning me to the grate now, no longer creeping slowly, no longer testing. It moved in short pulsing bursts. Tighten, pause, tighten, pause. Each squeeze forced more air out of me. My head grew light. The tunnel lights seemed to stretch and blur. I tried to move my right leg again, desperate for any space at all. The thing crushed down around it. There was a deep, sickening pressure inside my leg. Then something gave. I felt it more than heard it. A shift, a break. Pain exploded up through my body, so bright and sharp that I screamed without making a sound at first. After that, everything became confused. The lights above me swam. The buzzing of flies grew louder, then farther away. The smell filled my mouth. My chest burned. I remember something cold and wet sliding up my neck. I remember the slime touching my chin. I remember trying to close my mouth, but my lips were slick and weak. Then I tasted mildew, mold, rot. Something pressed against my mouth, soft and cold and alive in a way nothing like that should ever be alive. Then there was nothing. According to the doctors, I must have fallen into the drainage water while trying to clear the blockage. That was the official explanation. They said I probably slipped, hit the grate, broke my leg, and passed out from pain and fumes. They said the smell and stress could explain the confusion. They said I was lucky someone found me when they did. Apparently, by the time someone finally checked on me, the water was draining normally again, the blockage was gone, the tunnel was flowing the way it should, and I was lying there, spread out and propped against the grate like I had been placed there. I do not know why it let me live. That is the question I keep coming back to. If it wanted to kill me, it could have. I know that. It had me. It had my legs, my hands, my stomach, my chest, my mouth. I was alone, trapped, and too weak to fight. It could have pulled me under the water. It could have filled my throat. It could have squeezed until nothing inside me worked. But it stopped. Or maybe it did not stop. Maybe it only stopped outside. When I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I did was try to vomit. My body wanted to force something out, but there was almost nothing there. Only warm, foul water came up. Mostly water anyway. Thick enough to coat my tongue. It smelled too familiar. I could still taste that stale rot in my mouth. I could smell it in my nose. I could feel it in my skin, like it had soaked through me. I told the nurse something had been in the water. I told the doctor something grabbed me. I told them about the slime, the black blobs, the fat, the thing drinking what I threw up. They looked at each other. Then they told me I had been through a traumatic event. They put my leg in a cast. They gave me antibiotics. They told me to call if I got a fever, chills, swelling, or any flu-like symptoms. They said exposure to wastewater could cause infection and I needed to rest. Rest. As if I can rest. Now I'm sitting at home with my broken leg propped up, trying not to think about the tight feeling under the cast. Trying not to think about the taste that will not go away, no matter what I eat or drink. Trying not to think about the way my stomach cramps sometimes, deep inside, like something cold is turning over. My friends say I should be grateful I survived. I am. But gratitude does not stop the fear, because when I close my eyes, I can still feel it crawling higher. I can still feel it learning my shape. I can still feel it pause when I threw up, then start swallowing. And every time my leg throbs, every time my stomach tightens, every time that sweet rotten smell rises in the back of my throat, I ask myself the same question. Did it stop at my mouth? Story 5. For a very long time, I enjoyed the fruit of that tree. Every bite felt as powerful and wonderful as the first one I ever took. The taste was still rich, sweet, warm, and almost impossible to describe. It filled my body with pleasure and strength. The shame and horror I felt in the beginning had died long ago. It had been buried somewhere deep inside my soul, lost under all the years I gave away for the gift of staying young. That tree had been my companion for almost a century. I was born in 1934, yet I stayed young far past the age when any normal man should have grown weak and old. My skin stayed firm. My body stayed strong. My mind stayed sharp. That little piece of land became my whole world after I found it, and for a long time, I never wanted anything else. The air around it always felt full of strange joy. Every morning, I woke up and breathed it in like a blessing. Why would I ever want to leave? Why would I ever question it? I still remember the first day I found the place. It was near the edge of the Smoky Mountains, far away from the roads and the towns I had known. Back then, I was a desperate man. I wanted cheap land, quiet space, and distance from people. I had little patience for anyone. My car was old, nearly out of gas, and I was close to being stranded. Just when the needle was almost empty, I pulled off the main road and turned onto a dirt path. Trees closed in around my car almost at once. The road twisted downward along a steep hillside, narrow and rough. I knew I was running on fumes, but I kept going anyway. I told myself there was no point stopping while the car could still move. The dirt road eventually opened into a field. The path ended, but my car still rolled forward through tall grass and brush with the last bit of gas it had. I must have been too tired and numb to think clearly because I kept moving through the weeds for several minutes before I remembered I could be driving straight into danger. At the last second, I swerved around a tree and came to a hard stop just beyond the tree line. I sat there for a moment, angry at myself. Then I looked at the odometer and saw what I already knew. I had burned the last of my fuel, but that anger disappeared when I looked through the windshield. A graveyard was staring back at me. It was small and old, guarded by a low stone fence. Thick trees surrounded it on all sides, leaning over it like they were watching, but none of their branches crossed over the wall. The graveyard itself sat open under the sun, untouched by shade. Weathered headstones rose from the tall grass like old pillows left behind by the dead. The place was quiet in a way I had never felt before. In the middle of that old graveyard stood one tree. It was young, not yet bearing fruit, but its trunk was straight and strong. From it grew 9 branches. Each one looked almost the same size and length. They reached upward first, then bent sharply downward like curled fingers. The sight pulled me in. I had never seen anything like it. I got out of the car and walked to the fence. I looked over it like a child looking into someone else's yard. I was only going to look, but the longer I stared, the harder it became to turn away. Before I understood what I was doing, I had crossed the fence and was standing under the tree. Its shade was not just cool, it felt soft and comforting, almost alive. It wrapped around me like warm liquid hands, pressing gently against every part of me. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I only came back to myself when my foot hit something hard near the base of the tree. The roots had grown over most of it, but I could still see enough to know what it was. A headstone. It was half buried beneath the tree's roots, as if the tree had grown out of the grave itself. I brushed away dirt and grass until I could read the last name and the year of death. Handstern, 1924. The tree had grown from his resting place. At the time, I thought it was beautiful in a strange, poetic way. Evening was coming, and I had no gas, no plan, and no strong desire to go back to the world I had been trying to escape. The quiet of the graveyard and the pull of that tree were enough to make me stay for the night. The sky that night was bright with stars. The cold wind moved through the forest, but under the tree, I felt protected. I slept beneath its branches, and my dreams were filled with warmth and pleasure. I had never slept so deeply, and yet I had never felt so much in a dream. When I woke, the feeling stayed with me like a soft kiss pressed into my mind. At first, I did not think the tree had anything to do with it. I told myself it was only the peaceful place, the clean air, and the beauty of sleeping under the open sky. When I stretched and breathed in the morning air, I noticed something the darkness had hidden from me. Just beyond the graveyard was a cliff edge. Below it stretched a wide valley of trees, green and endless beneath the morning light. I stood there stunned. It felt like the place kept revealing one miracle after another. I spent most of that morning sitting on the rocky edge with my legs hanging over the drop. Back then, peace was not something I often felt. But there, I felt more than peace. I felt alive in a way that almost excited me. Breathing felt wonderful. Silence felt like music. My body felt full of energy. My mind felt clear. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Suddenly, I jumped to my feet and laughed. I turned back toward my car to check what supplies I had. I wanted to stay as long as I could. As I climbed back over the little stone fence, I stopped beside one of the 9 branches. At the very tip of it, I saw a bud. I was sure it had not been there the night before. It had appeared too quickly, but by then, I was already willing to accept strange things from that tree. I took it as a sign that I should stay. My supplies were not much, but I told myself I needed this. I needed time away from the world. I needed to cleanse my body and mind before returning to the dull, desperate life of looking for work and dealing with people. Even the thought of finding a job filled me with dread. Staying there felt easier. It felt right. So I spent the rest of the day walking around the area, eating under the tree, and sitting by the cliff. The silence was beautiful, but even in that peaceful place, my thoughts sometimes wandered where I did not want them to go. I thought about my family. I did not have much family left, and what little I had was spread across the country. But I had left behind a sister and a younger brother in New England. There was also a woman from my old town, someone I had tried to court on and off for years without much success. I remember thinking it would be nice to share that place with them. Then I realized I was having trouble remembering their faces. At first that did not make sense. I tried harder, but the harder I focused, the more their faces shifted in my mind. I could remember shapes and skin tones, but they blurred together like smoke. Alarmed, I ran to my dead car and dug through the glove box. Under a pack of cigarettes, I found the few photos from home I had kept. I picked one up and stared at it. My brother and sister stood on either side of me, both smiling softly. For a moment, I felt relieved, but the relief did not last. I could see their faces in the picture, but I could not hold them in my mind. The second I blinked, a fog covered them again. Any normal man would have been terrified by such a sudden failure of memory. But before I could fully panic, the first sign appeared. A rustling sound came from behind me. I turned around just as heavy clouds rolled across the bright sky, throwing the graveyard into deep shadow. Wind rushed through the grass and branches, spraying cold dew against my face. My eyes stayed open and fixed on the tree. The branch with the bud began to move. It creaked and groaned like old bones being forced out of a grave. Slowly, the curled branch shifted, bending downward like a hook. The bud at its tip swelled and pulsed. It was no longer small and green. It had become a wet, crimson sack, hanging from the branch like a piece of flesh on a cord. Then it burst open. Leaves and flowers exploded from it in a flash of color. Strange, bright petals spread into a pattern unlike any flower I had ever seen. At the center of that living bloom hung the first fruit. My holy fruit. I will admit, its smell was wonderful, but even that was not enough to stop my first reaction. I was shocked. I was disgusted. Hanging from the flower was a human head. It had no skin. Its red muscles hung wet and loose over the skull. The jaw sagged open. Empty eye sockets dripped blood down over white teeth. Long hair clung to the head in thick, wet strands. Some of it was stuck together with blood and pieces of flesh. But where the hair was clean enough to see, it was a rich brown with hints of amber. A weak braid still held part of it together. That braid, I knew it. With a shaking hand, I lifted the photo from my car. My sister stood there, smiling forever in that little piece of paper, with her brown braid hanging over her shoulder. The fruit looked like her. It was ruined and raw, but the cheekbones, the teeth, the hair, the shape of it all held an awful resemblance. I do not remember walking back under the tree, but suddenly I was there, staring up at it with my mouth open. The smell surrounded me. It pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. The braid hung only inches from my face. Its scent was pure pleasure. I gasped when I realized I had put the wet hair into my mouth. My hand reached up and pulled the head free from the flower. The taste destroyed every trace of disgust in me. What looked like blood tasted rich and warm. What looked like rotting hair tasted sweet and soft. What looked like raw muscle tasted better than the finest meat I had ever known. What had once seemed like my sister became food sent from somewhere beyond the natural world. Each bite broke open with flavors my tongue had never known. Bone cracked between my teeth. Soft brain and thick blood filled my mouth. Every swallow sent heat and strength through my body. It was terrible. It was beautiful. It was everything. When it was gone, I looked down at my hands. They were sticky and red. There was not a single piece left. A perfect calm filled me. Then the branch began to pull back. It curled into itself like a dying arm. Its bark turned black and split open. The first sign was gone. Suddenly horror struck me. I thought I had harmed the sacred tree. I tore strips of cloth from my clothes and wrapped the withering branch. I carried water to it. I did anything I could think of to help it. Then a sharp pain shot up my spine and into my head. It was so sudden and strong that I fell to my knees. The bucket slipped from my hands, spilling water over me. I only stopped myself from falling completely by grabbing the tree. The pain vanished as quickly as it came. I sat there gasping, carefully moving my neck and back. waiting for it to return. When it did not, I felt relief. My pants were soaked, so I pulled the photo from my pocket to see if it was damaged. It was wet but still whole. I waved it in the air to dry it, then looked up at the tree. The other 8 branches were still healthy. Only the first had withered. Feeling better, I looked down at the photo again. I believe that was the last time. The pain returned, softer at first, wrapping around my spine and moving into my eyes as I stared at my sister's face. I forced myself to keep looking, because something new and terrifying was happening. I could not recognize her. Her face blurred in the picture. It seemed to twist and fade, not only in my memory, but in front of my eyes. The longer I stared, the worse the pain became. For almost a minute I fought it. Sweat covered my forehead. I tried to remember her. I tried to force her face back into my mind. At last, the pain became too much. It felt like hot nails being pushed into my eyes. I turned away. Fear filled my stomach. Shame tightened my throat. For the first time, I understood what I had done. But I have come a long way since then. Those feelings are only a faint memory now. Even at that time, the tree quickly eased my distress. It released a scent so sweet and comforting that it filled my lungs with joy. It calmed me like the arms of a loving mother. I sighed and crushed the photo in my fist. I decided I would not let it distract me again. No family bond, no old friend, no mother, no lover could ever give me the peace I felt in that graveyard. Faces began to fade from my mind like mist in sunlight. I breathed deeply and let them go. Before long, I was living there. The forest gave me what I needed to build a small log cabin near the graveyard fence. Every morning, I sat under the tree and waited for another sign. One came every 10 years. The second sign was my brother. He bloomed like my sister had, as a ruined head hanging from a beautiful burst of leaves and flowers. His skull was twisted and wet, his muscles melting like the juice of ripe fruit. Whatever fear I still had disappeared with the first bite. His skull cracked under my teeth like dried fruit. Blood filled my mouth. The soft flesh slid down my throat like a blessing. As before, the branch withered into a black spiral after the fruit was gone. As before, whatever remained of his face vanished from my memory. As before, my conscience was buried under peace. Only after the third sign did I truly understand what the fruit had given me. My body had not aged, my strength had not faded, my health was perfect. The third sign was my mother, I think. She was especially full and ripe. The first bite cracked loudly among the stones, echoing through the graveyard like a sound inside an empty cave. Thick veins, blood, and brain matter spilled over my face. After I ate her, her face no longer came to me in dreams. Her voice no longer scolded me for sins I no longer cared to name. By the fourth sign, I could no longer even guess who I was eating. The past had become a fog. The future meant nothing. Only the present was clear. I lived under the tree. I flourished there. I was safe. There was no work to distract me, no relationships to hurt me, no sickness to weaken me. The tree protected me. The price seemed fair. Sometimes, a small piece of shame or fear would slip out from the cracks in my soul, but it never lasted. The happiness always swallowed it again. Decades of youth and pleasure can change a man's sense of right and wrong. At least, that was true until the 8th sign. That was only a decade ago, though it feels much farther away now. The tree bloomed again, and I waited patiently for the fruit to ripen. It was another head, another face I could not know. Its features no longer stirred memories in me. I ate without hesitation, but after the final swallow, I felt something. It began in my stomach. No, it did not begin there. It sprouted there. A sharp growth pushed upward from inside me, piercing through my stomach, lining and forcing its way into my throat. It was the first real pain I had felt in 50 years. I had grown soft in my paradise. Even a small injury would have seemed terrible to me by then. This pain would have broken a stronger man. I bent over, howling into the dirt. Something was growing inside me, moving upward through my body. It scraped and tore as it climbed. It stopped about a third of the way up my throat. It was not large enough to choke me completely, but every breath felt like I was swallowing razors. I lay on the ground, shaking, confused. angry, and miserable. My heavenly pleasure had been interrupted by torture. Slowly, I pushed myself onto my elbows. As I moved, the thing inside me dragged against the soft lining of my throat, cutting and splintering as it went. I gasped from the pain. But I understood then. A sapling was growing inside me. For weeks, I denied it. Then misery took over completely. The pain never left. I crawled through the graveyard like a wounded thing, leaving trails of coughed-up blood behind me. Month by month, I felt it grow. Leaves opened inside my chest. At first, they only tickled my lungs. Then they caused an itching rash that spread through my insides. The pain was unbearable. It kept growing. The itch burned through every part of my torso. After a year, I would have ended my life if I could have moved enough to do it. Instead, I lay against my beloved tree, upright only because the sapling had forced its way through my torn throat and held me in place. 9 branches had pierced through my chest. Their leaves were stained red. Pieces of my own insides hung from them like decorations. The tree inside me stole everything. My strength became food for it. My body grew weak and hollow. Only my life remained. No amount of blood loss, hunger, or exhaustion could kill me. A decade passed like endless punishment. The time I had once ignored now tormented me. Every second felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a year. Every year felt like a decade. The only hope I had left was the thing I had avoided for so long: decay. The old tree's shadow stretched over me. Its cool shade was the only comfort in my suffering. By then, my mind had lost more than memories of people. It had lost memory itself. The fog had taken everything. It grew darker each day, fed by my pain. Like an animal, I knew only the present, even though I prayed to escape it. At last, the 9th sign came. The 8 withered spirals above me burst back to life. They stretched upward, straight and proud, like the points of a crown. The 9th branch remained in the center, curled and waiting. Then its tip bloomed brighter than any sign before it. Its leaves shone like jewels. Its colors burned like starlight. I forced my eyes upward. For one brief moment, the beauty made me forget the pain. A wet, glowing bud appeared, bright as the sun. It pushed out from the branch like the head of a child being born. It opened slowly, and hot fluid dripped over me. The fruit inside was different from all the others. It still had skin. Its face was whole. Its hair was healthy. Its flesh was smooth and full of life. As it grew, I began to weep. I was staring at my own face. When it fully formed, it hung above me. Its closed eyelids trembled, then opened. I stared into my own eyes, and a new kind of pain burned through my body and soul. The fruit began to lower. A wet cord pulsed from the branch, stretching down and bringing it closer. I tried to cry out, but the sapling in my throat held my mouth open and filled me with choking pain. I was trapped at the base of the tree, my mouth forced wide. The 9th sign slid down my throat. Its size forced my jaw open until it felt like it would break. It tore my throat as it pushed its way down. Each strand of hair scraped against old wounds and opened new ones. The sapling inside me seemed to guide it deeper, pulling it down through me until, at last, it dropped into my stomach. Bile rose immediately. It burned up my ruined throat like lava. Blood and vomit exploded from my mouth. Violent convulsions shook my body from my jaw to my spine. When it was over, I leaned my head back against the tree I had loved for so many decades. The 9th branch had withered into a black spiral, joining the others. The rot spread from the branches into the trunk. The bark blackened. The sweet smell vanished, replaced by the stink of rotting flesh. The tree curled inward like a crippled hand until it was nothing but a decaying stump. It looked more like a tombstone than a tree. I lay there with tears running down my ruined face, staring into the dark sky, waiting for my end. I thought of a past that had been stolen from me, a present I could not survive, and a future I wanted only to escape. My stomach pulsed. The fruit was feeding the sapling. My body was no longer enough. The final fruit gave the new tree what it needed to finish growing. My vision blurred. My limbs went numb. My heart weakened. Then the tree inside me expanded. Its trunk burst through my stomach, tearing me open. Its roots wrapped around my spine and pushed into the earth. My body split, but I did not fall apart. I was held together by the very thing growing out of me. I was the final sign. Above me stood a young, proud tree, rising from my body. Its 9 branches curled like bent fingers around its trunk. At last, the pain was gone. Maybe my nerves had been destroyed. Maybe they had been eaten. I no longer cared. I lay there in my final moments, looking up at what I had created. A strange love filled me, like the love of a parent for a child. Then the new tree released its first sweet fragrance. It drifted over me, warm and beautiful. With my last breath, I inhaled the fruit of all my years, and as I exhaled, I wept with joy. The tree gave me one final gift. All regret melted away. Then I slipped into darkness. Story 6. All of this started with a dream. Actually, nightmare is the better word for it. I have always had nightmares, but most of the time, I can wake myself up from them. I open my eyes, move around in bed, turn onto my other side, and after a few minutes, I fall asleep again, like nothing happened. But this one was different. The day it started was completely normal. It was a Saturday, and I had the day off. One of the good things about working in medicine was that I usually had my weekends free. A friend of mine, Olivia, had recently moved into a new condo, and she invited me over to see it. I had known her for a couple of years by then, and even though we were not together every day, we were close enough that hanging out always felt easy. At that point in my life, I did not have much going on outside of work and school. I was focused on building my career and finishing my bachelor's degree. I had no boyfriend, only a few friends, and most of my time was spent studying, working, or trying to rest. Looking back, it was honestly one of the most peaceful times of my life. I drove about 30 minutes to Olivia's place. It was a nice drive, the weather was perfect, and the road to her condo took me through a lot of back roads. I passed fields, crops, and houses spread far apart from each other. The smell of summer came through the open windows, and the wind moved through my hair while music played loudly from the speakers. I remember feeling calm. The plan was simple. I was just going to hang out at her place, relax, and maybe watch something. After the week I had, I was more than ready for a quiet day. Before I knew it, I reached her neighborhood. It took me a little while to find her condo. Creek Ridge was a large neighborhood with a mix of condos and apartments. If I am being honest, it was not the best area, but it was not terrible either. I parked as close to her place as I could and spotted her sitting in a chair on her tiny porch. Porch might be too generous of a word. It was really just a small cement slab outside her front door, barely big enough for 2 chairs and a dying plant. But I was not in any position to judge. I still lived at home at the time. I turned off my car and stepped out. Olivia lowered her sunglasses and let out a low whistle. "What's a place like you doing and a girl like this?" she said, barely getting through the joke before she started laughing. I rolled my eyes and walked up the sidewalk toward her. She stood up when I reached the step, and I smiled despite myself. "It's good to see you, Livs." We hugged tightly. It had been a while since we had last seen each other. I had been busy with finals, and she had clearly been busy moving. For a few seconds it felt normal and warm, the way old friendships do when you finally get time to breathe. She pulled back and looked me over quickly. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "Derek's inside feeding the cat right now. Come on in." She pointed her thumb back toward the door. I paused. "You're still with Derek?" I raised an eyebrow because she had not mentioned him in months. I had assumed they had broken up again. That was kind of their pattern. She would text me for weeks saying how much she loved him, how sweet he was, how things were finally good. Then suddenly he was awful. She hated him, and she never wanted to see him again. Apparently, they were in one of the good phases. Olivia stopped with her hand on the door. "Oh, yeah," she said. "It's a long story." She waved it off like it did not matter, and opened the door. I sighed and followed her inside. The humidity outside had already made me start sweating, so the cooler air felt nice. The door closed behind me, and I looked around. The condo was a decent size. There was enough room for a living room, dining area, and kitchen. Toward the back, I saw a set of stairs. I remembered her saying it had 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. For someone living on her own, it was not a bad find. Then Derek walked into the room. He noticed me and gave a quick wave. "Hey," he said. "Good to see you, Maddie." In his arms was Olivia's orange cat, Mango. She was squirming, probably because she could smell the food he had just put out for her. I nodded. "Hey, good to see you too." I looked around again, trying to keep the conversation normal. "You guys all moved in?" I was trying to make small talk, even though I felt awkward. The uncomfortable feeling seemed to be coming only from me. Olivia and Derek both acted like everything was perfectly fine. The rest of the visit is not really important. Derek eventually went upstairs to play video games. Olivia and I stretched out on the couch and watched reruns of our favorite shows. We talked, laughed, and made fun of the same dumb things we always did. For a few hours, everything felt simple. By the time I got home that evening, I was exhausted from being social. I went straight to my room, changed, and crawled into bed. I barely remember pulling the blanket over myself before I fell asleep. That was when the nightmare started. In the dream, I was in some kind of futuristic place. The walls were metal. There were no windows. Everything felt sealed off and cold. It reminded me of a prison, but not an old one. More like something built far away from the world. I walked around for a while, trying to understand the space. The strange part was that it was furnished like an apartment. There were places to sit, a kitchen area, and rooms that felt lived in. Even though the place was strange, I somehow felt at home there. Two of my friends were with me in the dream, Jack and Amy. It felt like we had lived there forever. Like this was not a dream version of us, but another life we had always had. Things changed when I walked past the bathroom. The door was wide open. Inside was a normal-looking, full bathroom. A sink, a mirror, a toilet, and a tub. Nothing looked strange at first, but then my eyes landed on the sink. The faucet was dripping. One drop fell, then another, then another. Jack happened to be standing beside me, so I pointed it out. The moment he saw it, his face went pale. His whole body went stiff. Before I could ask what was wrong, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me away from the bathroom. "What the hell?" I said, stumbling after him. He did not answer. He pulled me into the main room, where Amy was already standing. She looked confused when she saw us. "What's going on?" she asked, looking from Jack to me. Jack's voice was low and urgent. "The faucet is dripping," he said. "She's here." Fear hit me hard, even though I did not understand why. Amy's eyes widened, and that scared me even more. "Who's here?" I asked. Neither of them answered. Jack pushed down on my shoulders until I was sitting on the floor. Amy sat in front of me, and Jack sat in front of her. It was like they already knew exactly what to do. "Cover your eyes," Jack said. "Don't look at her and don't make a sound, no matter what." I put my hands over my face and squeezed my eyes shut. I did not know what was happening, but I listened. Whatever was coming had terrified both of them, and that was enough for me. Everything went silent. I could not hear the hum of electronics anymore. I could not hear the air moving through vents. No one spoke. The silence became so complete, it felt heavy. Then I heard a soft shuffling sound from across the room. It came from the direction of the bathroom. My heart began pounding. I kept my hands over my eyes. I kept Jack's warning in my head. "Cover your eyes. Don't look at her. Don't make a sound." Then, without warning, I felt something beside me. It was on my left side. I could not see it, but I knew something was there. It felt like a person had leaned close to me and was staring directly at my face. I wanted to look so badly that it hurt. Then something wet touched my cheek. It dragged slowly across my skin. I pressed my lips together and swallowed the sound that tried to come out of my throat. A shiver ran through my entire body. Then I felt the same wetness on my toes. That was enough to rip me out of the dream. I shot up in bed, gasping. My arms were shaking as they held me up. My eyes darted around the room, but it was dark, and for a few seconds, every shadow looked dangerous. The nightmare was still too fresh. I could still feel that presence beside me. Then my trembling hand moved to my left cheek. There was a wet patch on my skin. I froze. Slowly I looked toward the end of the bed. My toes were sticking up under the comforter. I moved them carefully. There was moisture between them. A sick feeling rolled through me. The wetness made my toes slide against each other. In that moment, I threw the covers off and left my room. I decided the couch sounded much safer than my bed. I do not remember falling asleep again. I do not really remember if I dreamed after that, but I do remember seeing her. She was tall, too tall. Her body was thin and stretched looking. Long black hair fell down to her waist, wet and tangled. She wore a gray long-sleeve dress that reached all the way down to her bare feet. Just as she turned her head to look back over her shoulder at me, the dream ended. By morning, I had mostly talked myself out of being scared. I told myself I had drooled on my cheek. That explained the wetness there. I told myself my toes were wet because I had overheated under the thick comforter. I had been having a nightmare. I had probably been sweating. That was all. At least, that was what I wanted to believe. I wish I had never called Olivia. But I needed someone to tell me I was being ridiculous. I needed someone to confirm that it had only been drool and sweat, nothing more. So I called her and explained the dream in detail. I told her about the metal rooms, the bathroom, the dripping faucet, and the feeling that something had been there with us. I told her about Jack and Amy being scared. I told her about the wet feeling on my cheek and toes. When I finished, Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, was she wearing a gray dress? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I said slowly. Long black hair? My stomach tightened. Yeah. Really long fingers? My heart started racing. Yes. How did you know that? My voice shook. My throat suddenly felt dry, and swallowing became hard. Olivia laughed. Oh, that's just Miriam? Her laughter made me angry. I was terrified, and she sounded like I had just told her some funny little story. Who the hell is Miriam? I yelled before I could stop myself. If Olivia knew what was happening, I needed answers right away. She sighed like this was only a small inconvenience. To be honest, I don't exactly know what she is, she said, but she's followed me around basically my whole life. Her voice stayed calm. I could hear her moving something around in the background while she talked, like this was a normal conversation. Okay, I said. Then why am I seeing her? I don't know, Olivia said. No one else has ever told me they've seen her, other than Derek. In the background, I heard Derek's voice. You talking about Miriam? Yeah, Olivia called back. Maddie had a dream about her. They both laughed. My fear began mixing with rage. Oh, Derek said, sounding amused. Did she lick your toes too? I hate when she does that. I felt like ripping my hair out. What were they talking about? How could they be so calm? How could they laugh about something that had followed me out of a dream and left wet marks on my body? I started pacing around my bedroom. You're telling me this thing latched onto me somehow? I said. I was starting to sweat. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. Oh, she's harmless, Olivia said. I wouldn't worry about it. Her words did nothing to calm me. The worst she's done is move things around, Derek added. He sounded much closer to the phone now. I wouldn't be too worried. I hung up. I did not want to hear anything else from either of them. That was 5 years ago. Miriam never left. Olivia told me she would. She said Miriam came and went. She said if I ignored her, she would eventually stop. She said she was harmless. She was wrong. At first, it was only the dreams. I would close my eyes and find myself back in that strange place, or in my own bedroom, or in a hallway I did not recognize. There would always be a dripping faucet somewhere. Sometimes I would hear it before I saw anything else. Drip, drip, drip. Then the room would go quiet, and I would know she was near. I stopped sleeping normally. I began taking short naps whenever I was not at home. I slept in my car during lunch breaks. I slept at school with my head on a desk. I slept in waiting rooms, libraries, anywhere that was not my bedroom. Never for long, 2 hours at most. The lack of sleep caught up to me quickly. I started falling asleep at work. I made mistakes. I stopped eating much because my stomach always felt tight. School became harder to care about. My life started shrinking around the fear of closing my eyes. Then the scratches started. They appeared on different parts of my body, my arms, my legs, my back, places I could not have easily reached. At first they were light, like thin red lines. Then they became deeper. Sometimes I woke up with them burning across my skin. Sometimes they appeared while I was awake, after I heard wet shuffling somewhere in the house. That sound became part of my life. Soft, slow, wet, like bare feet dragging across tile. Sometimes it came from the hallway, sometimes from the bathroom, sometimes from the room behind me. My parents never noticed anything. They never heard the footsteps. They never saw her. If something moved, they blamed the cat, the wind, or me being tired. Their confusion made me feel more alone than anything else. Then came the feeling of being watched. It happened in the living room, in the kitchen while I was cooking, in the hallway when I turned off the lights. But it was always worst when I tried to sleep. I would lie in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, waiting. I always felt like Miriam was about to appear at the edge of my vision, like she was crouched beside the bed, waiting for me to turn my head. Sometimes I felt cold breath near my ear. Sometimes my toes would twitch under the blanket, and I would pull my feet up close to my body like a scared child. 5 years of this changed me. I became nervous all the time. I hated bathrooms. I hated silence. I hated the sound of water dripping from a sink. I hated waking up and not knowing if something had touched me while I slept. Recently, though, the activity stopped. For the last couple of weeks, everything had been quiet. No wet footsteps, no scratches, no dreams of gray dresses and long black hair, no feeling of something standing beside my bed. At first, I did not trust it. I stayed alert. I still checked behind doors. I still listened in the dark. But after a few days, I started to relax. Then a week passed, then another. I let my guard down. I stopped listening for her footsteps. For the first time in years, I slept longer than 2 hours. Only for a few nights, but it felt like a miracle. I started to think maybe Olivia had been right after all. Maybe Miriam had finally moved on. Maybe she had gotten bored with me. Maybe I was free. That is why I'm writing this now. I need to warn someone. I need someone to know what happened in case it gets worse again. I do not know what Miriam is. I do not know why she followed Olivia. I do not know why she followed Derek. I do not know why she came to me after one visit to that condo. I do not know if Olivia and Derek still see her. I do not know if there are more things like her. I only know that she will not leave me alone, and today my bathroom faucet started leaking.